To take revenge on me, the crazy female president locked me within 4 walls. She not only slipped me strange toys, but also forced me to raise my hand against her. I begged her for only one thing, to leave me alone and let me go. She didn't listen to my pleas, and my tears only made her even more angry. Just 3 years ago, I rose from the bottom to become rich thanks to the help of this mentally ill woman president. This flower of life, without any reason, was inflamed with a mad passion for me. The day after the female president exposed our relationship, that same flower mysteriously disappeared. They threw me into this dark room where I had already forgotten what the sun looked like. I threw my 300 million yuan in her face just to end this nightmare, but I only made it worse for myself. And what will you do with me now that I'm in your hands? I was so afraid I could barely get the words out. What, are you afraid? I remained silent, not because I was brave, but because she frightened me more than death itself. I was afraid that she would hurt me even more, and I begged, please don't torture me, I will not submit to your crazy whims. And she just smiled. I want to torture you. I want you to belong to me of your own free will, and believe me, you won't be able to escape. Have mercy, I beg you, I whispered as Jin Yao silently closed the door behind her. Left alone, I heard the lock click again, and the door opened slightly. A nurse entered. Even through her medical mask, her dazzling beauty was visible. She held a syringe filled with some cloudy liquid. Okay, baby, you'll just have to be patient. Just a shot and you'll fall asleep sweetly, don't worry, she cooed as I cowered in terror in the corner. What the hell is this? I won't give in, I screamed, but my efforts were pathetic against her strength. All I could do was feel the cold medicine pouring into my veins, plunging me into darkness. And so it happened again and again. Coming to my senses after another dose of dope, I found my chest tightly bound with white gauze. Pain shot through my body. I'd clearly just undergone some kind of surgery. Panic overwhelmed me. Were they really trying to dismember me for my organs? The nurse, noticing that I'd regained consciousness, said, "Oh, I'm awake. Everything seems to have gone well." I was furious. What have you done to me? I demand to see Jin Yao. Are you trying to kill me? I seethed with anger, but the nurse only looked at me in confusion. Then she poured some unknown mixture into my mouth again, which gradually subsided the sharp pain in my chest. My eyelids felt like lead and I fell into a deep sleep, and when I woke up the next time, I discovered that my arms and legs were free of the short ropes but shackled by a long, heavy chain. Now I could at least get out of bed, but my range of movement was strictly limited by the length of the iron. In my despair, all I could do was cry. Before I could even come up with any kind of escape plan, I heard the familiar, distinct sound of heels on the parquet floor outside the door. It was Jin Yao. He entered with a tray of steaming bento and said softly, "You need to eat, you've been hungry for a long time." As I picked at the food on my plate, I cringed in fear at Jin Yao's false tenderness. What the hell was he thinking? Meanwhile, Jin Yao carefully touched the bandages on my chest. With fake pain in his voice, he asked, "Does the wound still hurt?" I pulled back, glaring at him. "What the hell are you doing to me?" Jin Yao silently took out a small control panel from his pocket. A light press of a button, and it felt like my chest had been doused with molten lead from the inside. I was seized with violent convulsions and collapsed onto the cold floor. Jin Yao's face, meanwhile, looked incredibly peaceful. He enjoyed watching me suffer, but to keep me in check, he continued to feign concern. Crouching down, he lifted my chin with 2 fingers and said coldly, enunciating each word, "This thing inside you is a marvel of high technology. Not only will it give you eternal hell if you try to resist, but it will also allow me to track your every move. If you obey, I promise I won't press that button again." "Sister, I mean Jin Yao, I understand," I managed to squeeze out. "I will never try to escape again. I will obey you in everything." My mind finally capitulated. Remaining a plaything in Jin Yao's hands seemed the only way to survive. As long as I don't cross him, my life will be bearable. Why didn't I realize this sooner? I can't escape this demon in human form. For me, Jin Yao was the embodiment of doom, a simple and merciless nightmare. And for everyone else, Jin Yao seemed like an angel. "Now you're a good boy, I wish you'd do it right away," he whispered. The pain in my chest made me shudder again, and Jin Yao pushed me back onto the bed with a sharp movement. He loomed over me, breathing heavily and powerfully, and the air in the room seemed to be heating up to the limit. I tried to push him away, but he easily grabbed my wrists, pinning them to the mattress. Jin Yao's expression darkened. "Dare you resist?" His fingers tightened on my arms so tightly that my bones ached, and I froze, not daring to struggle any longer. Once he was sure I wasn't trying to kick anymore, he relented, and it finally dawned on me where this was all going. A frighteningly serious expression appeared on Jin Yao's face, and then he leaned down and sank his lips into mine in a kiss that was a mixture of pain, passion, and madness distorted by ecstasy. I no longer understood the line between pleasure and torture. When Jin Yao finally rose, a resounding slap stung my cheek. He knew how to really hurt me. Apparently, this session was over for today, because Jin Yao silently began to pack his things. Noticing that he was about to leave, I rushed forward with the last of my strength and shouted, "Jin Yao, open this damn lock and let me out." Jin Yao froze at the door and turned around mockingly. "Did you say something?" With a mocking smile, he said, "I'm not your sister or your girlfriend. Remember what you should call me. Only the head servant of the house can teach you manners. Good boy, since you've learned who's boss here. Then don't you dare make empty demands of me anymore." I choked with resentment and remained silent. To the sound of his retreating heels, I finally realized the full depth of my fall and helplessly stretched out on the bed, accepting my cruel fate. Thinking about what lay ahead, I lay awake for about 2 hours until the familiar clicking of Jin Yao's heels echoed through the silence once again. I understood that this was my last chance. If I didn't seem necessary to him, my life would lose all meaning. "Jin Yao, let's start over. I really do love you," I squeezed out. "Ha, men tend to lie for survival." "Then why did you fall for empty words and run away from me?" he said coldly. I justified myself by saying it was all a lie. "You only wanted my money," he continued to press, but I assured him, "Now I understand that you love me more than anyone." I hope he believed my sincerity. "The main thing is, don't try to please me. You don't have to pretend. I'll give you everything you want." These words made my insides clench with hope. My words seemed to melt the icy expression on Jin Yao's face. A smile appeared on his lips for the first time. He walked over to the bed, knelt down on my lap, and hugged me tightly. His long hair flowed like a waterfall, and the familiar scent of moonlight instantly filled the space around him. And then the hellish pain from the implant pierced me again. I abruptly fell onto the mattress, breaking out in a cold sweat. "Sorry, it was an accident." Jin Yao stood up immediately. It turned out he'd accidentally knocked over the control panel of this high-tech toy. I was a little distracted. Having recovered from the shock, he leaned over me and carefully touched the bandages on my chest. "Better yet, much better. Well then, let's pick up where we left off." Jin Yao seemed to be trying to give me a chance to improve, but I ruined everything again with my clumsiness. Enraged, Jin Yao shouted, "You've been leading me on for 3 years and ruined your health. Now you'll stay here for the rest of your days." "Wait, Jin Yao." I desperately grabbed his thigh, pleading, "Master, I can do this. Give me one more chance. If you leave now, I'll rot here alive." Jin Yao sank heavily onto the edge of the bed. Looking down at me, he chuckled, "Heh, really? I want to make sure you've learned your lesson." And he kissed me. His alluring lips, soft earlobes, white neck, that deep kiss was mind-blowing. "There you go, my obedient boy." "You're quite a bold kisser," Jin Yao said with a hint of tenderness, running his hand over my head. "Are you really willing to do this?" I nodded, not daring to argue. "Of course I love you, so I'm ready to obey you in everything. You seem nice, but obedient boys never lie." In the end, thanks to my efforts, Jin Yao's mood gradually improved, replacing anger with mercy. He forced my mouth open and, after examining it critically, said coldly, "Look closely at my tongue. It seems there's something missing in you." It dawned on me too late. My own language, what else could he deprive me of? Jin Yao laughed mockingly, then lazily clapped his hands. The door swung open and 3 bodyguards entered the room. "First, tidy up this bed," he ordered them. The mere sight of Jin Yao made me shudder. What had I done wrong again? Why was he treating me like a doll again? Men become increasingly cruel when they feel in control. "You have learned to please me, but that is not enough. I want absolute submission," he said. My heart sank as I saw Jin Yao heading for the exit. His calm departure was surely concealing another devious plot. After a while, the door opened again. The same nurse stood there. Without saying a word, she took out a surgical clamp and roughly clamped my tongue with it. Horror took my breath away, but there was no point in resisting. The nurse only cooed softly, "Handsome, be quiet. Don't resist, it will only hurt more." In one swift motion, she removed the piercing, pierced my tongue completely, and carefully stitched it up. Then she applied healing ointment to the wound and silently left. Pain pierced everything inside me, and I burst into tears. Why is Jin Yao doing this to me? When we first met, he was completely different, gentle, caring, and meticulously protecting me from any misfortune. As soon as we got closer, this angel turned into a tormentor. Could he still not forgive me for those 3 years of separation? Time dragged on endlessly until familiar footsteps were heard in the hallway again. Right on schedule, Jin Yao entered the room with a bottle of warm milk. With false concern in his voice, he said, "Your tongue is damaged, so you'll have to eat only liquids for now. Are you worried about me?" I could barely breathe from the pain, and in the meantime, he unscrewed the lid and brought the neck to my lips. I couldn't swallow as fast as he poured the milk in and choked. Jin Yao immediately froze and began patting my chest with feigned alarm. "Is it too cold? Do you want me to warm it up?" I would have gladly thanked him, but how was he going to warm the milk? There was no microwave or kettle in this room. And then I saw with horror how he took milk into his own mouth and began to carefully feed it to me until my lips and cheeks were completely numb. All I wanted at that moment was for Jin Yao to just let me go. But with my mouth sewn shut, I couldn't utter a sound, letting hot tears silently drip onto the pillow. Jin Yao just laughed. "Are you crying from happiness? Well then, I'll feed you like this every day." I tried to somehow attract his attention by making mooing sounds. But Jin Yao pointedly ignored any attempts at protest from me, focusing solely on pouring every last drop of milk into me. Having emptied the bottle, he lightly slapped me on the chest and left. I was left lying there, completely alone, my body screaming for basic relief. I couldn't bear it any longer. A living person can't neglect their basic needs. My body was completely immobile and my mouth was clenched shut, preventing me from even calling for help, and the bed instantly descended into chaos. The clammy dampness and suffocating scent of cedar in the confined space became the climax of physical and mental torture. Early in the morning, the door opened, and Jin Yao, entering, immediately pinched his nose in disgust. "Zhang, you're already a grown man, and yet you still manage to make such a mess in bed. What a hassle you are." I couldn't justify myself and was forced to just look up at him guiltily. Judging by Jin Yao's cold gaze, he would probably decide to lock me in the damp bathroom as punishment for this incident. "Please don't do this to me. You know I didn't do it on purpose," I tried to moan through my tears. Jin Yao narrowed his eyes and an unhealthy glimmer gleamed in them. "What makes you think I'm uncomfortable? On the contrary, watching you suffer is pure pleasure." How much I wanted to bring back that old, gentle Jin Yao, but it was too late. I'd had enough of these pathetic pleas. I remember Jin Yao perfectly well in the real world, the ruthless master of a business empire, unforgiving of even a drop of lies, and I dared betray his feelings. Did I know how it would end? Of course not. And now I didn't dare utter a word, knowing that any movement of my tongue would only fuel his anger further, bringing about his inevitable downfall. "Now, get to the bathroom," came the verdict. I lay in the bathtub filled with hot water while Jin Yao watched me with a stony face, lazily saying, "Now clean the toilet for me." I was shivering. A sharp, loud slap rang out in the silence of the room. "He's cold, you see," he said mockingly. "You are still disobedient, calling me by my name instead of master," he said, but as soon as he raised his hand to punish, he seemed to lose his strength, not daring to deliver a real blow. "Owner," I screamed in fear, and Jin Yao only smiled bitterly in response. Men should be submissive when they are taught a lesson, shouldn't they?" After that, I didn't dare say a word. Jin Yao rested his chin on his hand and whispered directly into my face, "Do you want to avoid unnecessary pain? Just be a good boy, understand?" I merely nodded shakily. "You swore your love to me," whispered sweet words, making me believe you were as sincere as you were 3 years ago. "Zhang, how wrong you were. I hate you for playing on my feelings just to deceive me. All these 3 years I've been searching for you to beat the nonsense out of you and make you understand reality. And now you're in my hands, but why can't I break you completely? I hate you. And myself," Jin Yao blurted out in pain. I choked on tears and air, feeling the last of my strength leaving my exhausted body. Jin Yao casually wiped away my tears, and I looked at him with bitter resentment. It was hard to believe that the man who once carried me in his arms had now become the embodiment of absolute ruthlessness. This realization brought that familiar, suffocating pain back to my chest. "That expression again," Jin Yao snapped coldly. "Don't look at me like that. Remember your place." He then pointedly touched the remote control. I was racked with terror and chest pain. "I understand, master, forgive me. I've learned to be obedient," I screamed, begging for mercy. Jin Yao finally gave me that dazzling, yet even more terrifying smile. "Master, I'm so cold, I think I have a fever," I raved, feeling his cool palm touch my forehead and breaking into sobs from despair. His fingers on my forehead brought a moment of relief. Deep down, he still didn't want me dead. What a complex, contradictory demon he is. Soon, Jin Yao gave a short order to the manager, "Take him away, and lock him up properly." I was thrown back into that dark room. Jin Yao hadn't shown up for 3 whole days, but at least the isolation gave me time to catch my breath. When the door finally creaked, bright daylight hit my eyes. The breath of fresh air seemed like an unrealistic luxury, and for some reason it made me want to cry. Jin Yao stood at the threshold, and next to her was a sharply dressed woman of about 30 in an impeccable business suit. "Give him the dirtiest and hardest work in the stables," he coldly ordered the manager. "Yes, sir," she bowed. After Jin Yao left, a woman named Wang helped me up and said softly, "Mr. Xiang, I've been serving here for 10 years and I know his character. He's just angry right now, please bear with me." "Thank you, Sister Wang, it's all my fault, I betrayed his trust," I sighed bitterly. "Oh, if it weren't for your mistress's insane devotion to you, you'd be long gone. Okay, get ready. The stable work is dirty and hard, but at least you'll get a chance to see him sometimes. He likes to drop in there." "Thank you, I'd agree to anything, just not to sit in that dark dungeon," I whispered, hoping that in the open space I would have at least a ghost of a chance of escape. Jin Yao's remote control must have some range. If I could just get outside the city and find a clinic right away to cut this thing out, I frantically plotted my escape. But Sister Wang immediately placed a thick bag over my head, plunging me into darkness and sat me in the back of the car. Reassuring me as she drove only a couple of minutes before the engine died. The horse farm was right next to the mansion. Taking off my bag, I looked around. Endless green pastures stretched out around me, and in the distance those very same villas were visible. The stud farm's territory occupied no less than 200 acres, and about a dozen thoroughbred horses were kept in spacious paddocks. "Your responsibilities include their full care, including daily bathing. Be sure not to starve them," Sister Wang said dryly. "I see, so am I all alone here?" I asked. "Yes, here's your monthly ration, you cook it yourself. No one will bring you ready-made food," she said, pointing to a bag of rice and several packets of freeze-dried food on the ground. "Is he really going to torture me with this?" Sister Wang patted me on the shoulder sympathetically, and I could only swallow my tears in silence. Left alone, I shouldered the sack of rice and wandered towards my new home. The dwelling turned out to be a tiny wooden hut, where instead of a bed there was only a rough board. To my surprise, I found a thick down comforter and pillow inside. Jin Yao knew about my poor health and tendency to catch colds, so he'd taken care of that. So there was still a modicum of concern left. The stove was a crude circle of bricks and a well was nearby. Overcoming the pain in my chained legs, I hauled water and somehow managed to light a fire. Sitting down to dinner, I managed only a couple of spoonfuls, after which my body, exhausted by illness, collapsed onto the hard bed. I was awakened by heavy footsteps outside the door. The bodyguards roughly dragged me outside and literally threw me onto the back of a horse. I was wearing a neat leather riding cloak. Jin Yao stood nearby, looking at me with an icy gaze. "Did I ever let you sleep all day?" he snapped, and I was too scared to even cough. "Haven't you cleaned out the stalls yet? Get to work now," he called after me dismissively. I had no strength left for arguments, and I dreamed of only one thing: to fall back onto the boards and fall asleep. When I woke up the next day, I decided to give it my all so as not to anger Jin Yao further. Sister Wang appeared and handed me a luxurious steak with a smile. "The owner said that this dish is not to his taste today. He told me to give it to you." I looked at the neatly sliced meat and smiled bitterly. He knew perfectly well that I liked it exactly this way, but he was simply covering up his concern with a feigned coldness. Sister Wang just shook her head and silently walked away from the wooden house. "Why do you keep playing with me? You are the most cruel and incomprehensible creature in the world," I thought, staring helplessly at the ceiling. On the 4th day of the routine, I was already obediently preparing hot food for myself over the fire, resigned to my fate. Suddenly, Sister Wang brought another package of food. "These are leftovers from the master's table. The master has no appetite today, and it's a shame to throw them away, so I brought you this." Did Jin Yao truly impart this himself, or was it merely Sister Wang's initiative? If the former, then I again dared not even touch this gift, afraid to cross an invisible line. "Less questions, the master knows what he's doing," Sister Wang said as she walked away and immediately disappeared behind the door. I understood that without Jin Yao's direct orders, she would never have brought me breakfast. After all, the woman had been serving in the mansion for a whole decade and knew the owner's character until his last breath. Looking at the half-eaten sandwich and eggs, I felt like a complete loser, but I still ate greedily. After a hard day at the stables, the porridge was clearly not enough, and this food from Jin Yao's table gave me at least some strength. Having finished breakfast, I fed the horses some hay and carefully bathed my favorite, named Mare, although after this I was especially aware of my own unpleasant odor. In contrast to the clean horse, I seemed like a walking disaster, but I remembered that there was still hot water in the utility room and allowed myself to quickly freshen up. There was no electricity on the farm, so when darkness fell, life came to a standstill in absolute, ringing silence. Huddled under the blanket, I waited for dawn and, tired of endless thoughts and nightmares, fell into a deep sleep. In my dream, I imagined myself being turned into a dried bird while still alive, and I jumped out of bed in horror, realizing that I could no longer remain in this captivity. Feeling for the handle in the darkness, I pushed the door. The creaking sound scared me to death, but the cool night air that rushed into my face drove the fear deep inside. There couldn't have been a better moment to escape. When I reached the edge of the pasture, I came up against a high fence with sharp metal bars which I had no chance of getting through head-on. I spent almost an hour walking around the perimeter in the hope of finding a breach, but the solid fence seemed monolithic and impregnable. Since there is no hole, I will dig it myself. A crazy idea struck me, and returning to the stable for a heavy iron tool, I thought with a feverish anticipation of freedom, "Haha, now you won't be able to hold me back." Having chosen a secluded corner in the grass, I began to furiously peck at the dry earth, wetting it with water to make it soft, and worked until the first rays of dawn began to break in the east. The depth of the excavation had already reached half a meter. It was impossible to leave everything on the surface, so I carefully camouflaged the hole with turf and ran back to the hut. The day began as usual, and at first Jin Yao seemed surprisingly good-natured. Gracefully mounted on a thoroughbred horse, he rode around the estate, and I was forced to only watch his movements from afar. Even at the peak of my powers, I didn't deserve a single glance from him. For him, I was just part of the landscape. Suddenly, Jin Yao reined in his horse right in front of me and ordered me to help him dismount, making it clear that I was to serve as a living support. I had already extended my hands, but he pulled back in disgust. "Get your filthy paws off me, you stink a mile away, better bring a stool." My attempts to please were again shattered by his contempt, but I obediently ran for the stand, although he, apparently on purpose, stepped right on my wrist with his heel. Pain shot through the back of my hand as his heavy weight crushed me into the ground, but as soon as he landed, I tried to hide my tears. Pretending that I was simply going to take a break and wipe away the sweat, I exchanged a few words with Sister Wang, who had come up. "The master told me to bring this to his room this evening," she said, leaving me completely perplexed. It seemed that all my hopes for an evening of rest had been dashed again in an instant. Noticing my condition, Sister Wang sympathetically sat down next to me on the grass and patted me on the shoulder. "Mr. Xiang, just be a good boy today, and the mistress will surely change her anger to mercy. Don't make things worse." "Ha ha ha, is that really possible?" I smiled bitterly. After all, Jin Yao had only one goal, to make me break completely. Be patient a little longer, the bad streak in life doesn't last forever. Maybe one day he'll cool down and you'll go back to being that couple everyone envies. These words made me shudder with hurt. What the hell kind of couple are we? Who does he even think I am? A shoebox, a bag of feed, a royal toy, or a powerless slave? Unable to find words to console me, Sister Wang silently shook her head and walked out of the farm, leaving me alone in the vast, windswept field where no one else was supposed to appear that day. Taking advantage of my freedom, I abandoned work with the horses, collapsed on the bed in the hut, and fell fast asleep, naively believing that today would pass peacefully. But this dream was cut short. In the middle of the night, the door swung open. Two huge men burst into the room, pulled a hard helmet over my head, twisted my arms and legs, and threw me into the back of a car. I woke up in the familiar office of Jin Yao, who was leisurely sipping a fine red wine, looking at me with eyes flushed from the alcohol. "Master, I'm hungry again," I whispered. The last few days on meager rations were taking their toll, and at the sight of the exquisite desserts on the table, my mouth started to water, while Jin Yao only smiled slyly and creepily. "Are you hungry? What do you want to eat?" he asked mockingly, and I waved my hands in fear. No, sir, I was joking." He grabbed my chin with his fingers and laughed. "You ungrateful one, if you don't eat properly, where will you get the strength to work?" After which, as if in some kind of trance, he silently took out his usual bottle of milk and roughly poured the contents into my mouth. "Listen, Jin Yao, isn't this expired?" I tried to protest, feeling a strange sour taste. But he just patted me on the cheek. What an obedient boy, you immediately recognized the fake. Come on, eat more, he added, and I mentally laughed bitterly at my fate as a person who could only eat spoiled food. Jin Yao looked at me with the gaze of a predator who wanted to swallow me whole, and I, lying next to him, caught myself with a mad desire to reach out and touch his hair, like in those distant times. He used to love these touches, but now this man has turned into a merciless overseer, controlling my breathing. At dawn, I was once again packed into a van by the same thugs and returned to the damned horse farm. Even falling to the very bottom did not sate his thirst for revenge. I was overcome with despair inside. Trusting Sister Wang's promises was stupid, so I decided to speed up my escape plan. Returning to the abandoned pit, I dug into the ground with redoubled energy, working without respite. In less than 2 hours of diligent digging, I managed to overcome the most difficult part of the fence base. All that was left was to carefully clear away the remaining soil from below so that the structure would collapse on its own, but the sun was already rising too high and it was impossible to continue. Having carefully filled the passage with branches and washed off the sweat and dirt, I collapsed onto the boards in the hut to gain strength before the day's hard labor. During the day, I again diligently looked after the horses and even waited for Sister Van to give me another piece of steak, which she secretly stole from the owner's table especially for me. Rumor had it that this piece had been deliberately overcooked to ruin Jin Yao's appetite, so it was left to me. After swallowing it, I fell into a deep sleep, but as night approached, I quietly crept out and headed for my tunnel. That evening was my last chance for salvation. I had to proceed with extreme caution. I dug for just over an hour until the earth, under intense pressure, finally caved in. The path to freedom was open. Imagine what happiness it was, after so much effort, to see the light of the streetlights through that narrow opening. I actually managed to do it. Haha, I tossed aside the useless piece of iron and stuck my head outside. The air outside the fence seemed completely different. The faint, intoxicating scent of spring was clearly present in it. But just as I was feeling overjoyed, the smell struck me as strange. I looked up and, overcome with terror, nearly fell back into the pit. Jin Yao stood right at my exit, his face contorted with anger. "What a lousy dog you are, Xiangyang," he whispered. "Jin Yao, please let me go," I screamed from the depths of the tunnel at the top of my lungs. A piercing, unbearable pain shot through my chest. Jin Yao mercilessly pressed the remote control button and held it until I lost consciousness from the pain, only to awaken to the icy spray. I was thrown into a deep well, filled almost to the brim with water. I frantically raised my head to avoid drowning in this trap. My face was pressed tightly against the cold concrete wall. There was a slight rustle. Jin Yao squatted at the edge and, grabbing my chin with his fingers, mockingly said, "Did you think I'd let you go so easily? I just like looking at your desperate face, ha. Just kill me already, you bastard," I screamed back furiously. "Okay, I'll help you," Jin Yao replied coldly, and with his graceful yet merciless hand, he began to forcefully push my face under the water. I closed my eyes, tired of resisting this endless humiliation. My body sank downwards. I decided it would be better to drown here and now. What's the point of living as a toy in someone else's hands? At that moment, I made the final decision to end this nightmare once and for all. The man who once swore his love to me brought me to the brink of death, forcing me to seek refuge in nothingness. Gradually, consciousness began to fade and the pain receded. The dull sound of the well-lit opening and the voices of paramedics echoed through the water. Jin Yao had called an ambulance at the last moment. Haha, that paranoid man really can't lose. Will he really not even let me die? When I was pulled to the surface, I was still alive, and that decision was entirely Jin Yao's. "Mr. Jin, the patient has critical hypothermia and severe asphyxia. His vital signs are 0, the doctor reported fearfully. "What does this mean?" Jin Yao asked in a low voice. "The patient is barely responding. He seems to be deliberately holding his breath and is reluctant to fight. Bring him back to life at any cost. I won't let him die," Jin Yao shouted, though his voice was noticeably shaky. Turning around, he strode quickly into the hospital room. I lay with my eyes closed, feigning death, when he sat down next to me. His cool, graceful hand gently touched my hot, pale face. The touch made me feel better for a moment, and then he kissed me softly on the cheek. "Xiangyang, why do you always disobey me? Just breathe. I didn't give you permission to die." What unbearable manipulation! Should I finally allow myself to die quietly and completely? Cursing him in my thoughts, I didn't dare move because my chest was bursting with pain, and I could only continue to play the role of an unconscious patient. Mr. Jin, we've consulted with top experts. If the patient refuses to breathe on his own, we'll have to resort to a radical procedure, the doctor said as he entered. Do whatever it takes, I don't care about his whims, Jin Yao snapped, looking at my motionless body. You don't have to make a scene here, the patient's unconscious anyway, he snapped at the doctor. Hearing this, Jin Yao angrily pinched my arm. It finally dawned on him that I was just pretending. Frightened by this new intrusion, I immediately opened my eyes and whispered piteously, Jin Yao, I'm breathing honestly, just don't hurt me anymore. Heh heh, and you're still a master at lying to my face, he chuckled. I felt so bitter that tears sprang to my eyes. I didn't know whether he was genuinely touching my forehead, checking for a fever, or simply mocking me, but my pitiful appearance was unlikely to move this monster to pity. Don't play the victim, Xiangyang, it won't work on me anymore, Jin Yao said coldly, letting go of my hand, although something like panic flickered in the corners of his eyes. Realizing that pretense was useless, I dropped my head limply onto the pillow, mentally resigning myself to any operation, if only this hell would end. Cut the airway and insert a tube, Jin Yao gave a cruel order, then, wiping a fake tear from his face, he silently left the room. No, Jin Yao, please don't, I screamed at the top of my lungs as the doctors stepped forward with their instruments. And at that moment, as if in a delirium, you're still terrified of death, aren't you, little Gao Yang? His voice rang out in my ear. I won't do it again, I swear, just leave me alone. Without my permission, even death is forbidden to you. What a disobedient creature you are. Do you want to die? First I'll save you, and then I'll kill you again and again until I get tired of it, he whispered with a terrifying smile. Keep up the good work and see how long you can last. His words made me break out in a cold sweat. I clearly understood he wasn't joking. The embedded chip and 24/7 monitoring in the clinic's database guaranteed that I would simply not be allowed to die of my own free will. In these times, even taking my own life is an unaffordable luxury. Returning some time later, Jin Yao took the bowl of hot rice porridge from Sister Wang. He carefully scooped up the spoon and gently brought it to my lips, and the sudden, frightening tenderness made me shudder. Don't overdo it, he's still very weak after his coma, Sister Wang reminded us with concern, watching our strange maneuvers. I was mentally infinitely grateful to her. If someone else had dared to tell Jin Yao what to do, he would have long ago ground him into dust, but he listened to this woman's advice. Having served in the mansion for 10 years, Sister Wang had long since become something of a senior mentor to him, and her gentle influence was sometimes the only shield between me and his madness. Noticing my confusion, Jin Yao sighed heavily, gently stroking my head with that very expression of tenderness that made my skin crawl. Come on, baby, open your mouth and eat at least a spoonful, he coaxed me so carefully as if nothing terrible had happened. And although this change in mood was terrifying to me, my stomach demanded food, and for the first time in a long time my soul timidly hoped, had this storm finally subsided. Trying to cement this fragile peace, I looked at him ingratiatingly, but Jin Yao immediately saw through my thoughts. Are you trying to please me again to atone for your guilt? His piercing, judge-like gaze instantly deprived me of all arguments. I had naively thought that a sincere confession would melt his heart, but now any words only irritated him further. I don't want to hurt you, Xiangyang, but every time you try to run away, it's like I'm hurting myself, he said quietly, and for the first time, real, living pain sounded in his voice. Tell me honestly, you feel it too, right? He whispered, looking at me with the eyes of a man who was as confused by his own demons as I was. Do you think I'll go mad with grief if you die? No, I'll just get tired of your hide-and-seek game, Jin Yao said with cold disdain. Noticing my tears, he snapped, then why do you continue to behave like this? You're just a debtor who has no chance of paying me back, my slave and captive. You don't have to care about me, I whispered back, and Jin Yao froze in surprise at this strange truth. A genuine tenderness flashed in his eyes, but as soon as I relaxed, a deadly aura appeared on his handsome face again, forcing me to press myself into the pillow in horror. The owner was on the verge of a breakdown, and Sister Wang immediately rushed to take him away, burying herself in her work to give him time to cool down and not cause further trouble. Left alone, I was shaking with fear until Jin Yao returned and appeared at the door. You have 3 days to recover, and then you will go to the stables again. Watching him go, Sister Wang shook her head. Oh, Xiangyang, you're so bad at keeping your mouth shut. Why are you telling him this? He's taking it as an attempt to deceive him again. Doesn't he trust me anymore? I asked, despair in my voice. Of course not. After all this torment, you want to force him to believe in fairy tales. It's a vicious circle. If you keep this up, he'll just grind you into dust. Don't you understand that lying is the worst thing you can do? The woman scolded me sternly. Thank you for telling the truth, Sister Wang, but why are you helping me like this? I asked quietly, feeling completely lost. Because I've been serving here for 10 years, and this is the first time I've seen the mistress so crazy about someone. She loves and hates you at the same time, Xiangyang. That's exactly why I'm helping you both. I want this nightmare to end as soon as possible. If you truly love her, prove it with actions, not pathetic words. Otherwise, if she decides to finish you off completely, I won't intercede, Sister Wang warned, leaving me alone with the difficult thoughts of what to do next. Sitting locked up day after day, I had no idea how to behave, feeling that I had tightened this deadly knot to the limit. After 3 allotted days, despite my unhealed wounds, I was again overpowered by the brutes and taken away in a stuffy van back to the damned horse farm. While carrying heavy sacks of food, I thought that death would be the best release from this endless waste of resources and mental energy. Exhausted, I collapsed right onto the tall green grass, staring blankly at the endless blue sky. Blue sky, green grass, horses, is this really my home? I muttered the song bitterly under my breath, feeling myself gradually losing my mind from hopelessness. I didn't care at all what would happen next, even when the familiar menacing shadow of Jin Yao rose above my body again. You dare ignore me after everything? His voice boiled with the rage of a man whose divine love had been trampled into the dirt. I just closed my eyes tightly, expecting the usual hail of blows. Fatigue took away the last crumbs of fear from me, leaving only the desire to lie down and not move. When Jin Yao started beating me, I almost didn't feel any pain anymore. It seemed like my tormented soul had finally separated from my mortal body. Master, stop! Master Xiang is dying. Sister Wang's piercing scream cut through the air, bringing Jin Yao back from his frenzy. He stumbled back, checking my pulse in a panic, and then sank to the grass with bloody hands, completely out of control. Losing the last vestiges of consciousness, I whispered to myself that I was finally free, but his mad whisper sounded in my ear. No, Xiangyang, I didn't allow you to die. Open your eyes. If you dare die here, I'll make the whole world answer for it. Jin Yao screamed hysterically, calling for emergency help on the radio. Don't scare the guy even more. Load him into the car quickly, Sister Wang commanded, taking control of the situation. Time dissolved into fog again. Either one day passed, or long weeks dragged on before I could open my eyes. Soft sunlight flooded the sterile hospital room, reflecting off the snow-white sheets, and a familiar nurse was on duty nearby. Dr. Zhang came in, carefully examined my indicators, and nodded. The patient is recovering, but we will observe him for another week before discharging him. Doctor, do I really have to get better so quickly? I'd like to stay here longer, I asked weakly, afraid to return to that hell. The doctor just smiled warmly. Young man, don't worry, we'll give you time to get stronger, taking my words for the consequences of psychological trauma. In the midst of this conversation, the door opened and Jin Yao entered the room, this time in a formal suit, but with the same thermos in his hands. The doctor, noticing the guest, quickly led the staff out the door, leaving us alone. Jin Yao silently unscrewed the lid of the thermos, pouring a thick, golden chicken broth into the bowl, the aroma of which made my chest ache. Having experienced clinical death, I was no longer afraid of anything, looking at him with an empty, detached gaze. And he just chuckled, haha, you thought you could escape me through death. It won't work, Xiangyang. Jin Yao, is there really no humanity left in you? I asked quietly, and he merely narrowed his eyes menacingly in response. You dare to be so insolent? Have you forgotten what awaits you at the horse farm? Behave well, take care of your health, and then... His voice softened as he touched my cheek with a warm hand. You won't test my patience anymore, will you? At that moment, a strange feeling of surrender washed over me. I meekly opened my mouth, accepting the first spoonful of fragrant soup from his hands. After spending a few more days like this, I fully recovered and even received permission to walk in the quiet hospital park. Although I was still being followed closely by guards, I felt happy even without my usual shoes, sincerely not understanding why his attitude towards me had changed so abruptly. Could it really be that after all the circles of hell, we'd actually managed to turn the page? I didn't want to test it by escaping anymore. Any attempt to go outside would have resulted in inevitable disaster, especially since Jin Yao had surrounded me with a tight ring of professional security. Formally, this was presented as a concern for safety, but I knew very well that this was a golden cage from which there was no escape. On the other hand, living next to an incredibly beautiful, influential, and rich woman who now showers you with care, isn't that the ultimate dream? The outside world might never truly understand our story, but being a tame pet with such a master seemed like a safe compromise. Returning to the ward in a relaxed mood, I expected to see the usual picture and receive another dose of care. But Jin Yao was curled up on the bed, having fallen asleep right there, exhausted by his own torment and worries about me. Quietly removing my coat from my shoulders, I carefully threw it over the sleeping man and for the first time in a long time looked at his face without fear, entangled in that long hair that looked like dark seaweed. With her coat slung over her shoulder, she looked the epitome of impeccable high society, strong, noble, and impossibly alluring. Her graceful figure continued to thrill me every night, keeping me on the edge of reality. "Have you admired her enough?" she asked. Jin Yao opened her eyes slightly and said with a slight smile, "Were you scared by my gaze? You finally woke up, since you were allowed to go for a walk. I think I'm almost back to normal, and, yeah, I'd love some more of that chicken soup you're making." "Then go back inside and drink it. Come on, take our little friend back to his place," she commanded the bodyguards. She wanted to protest, "No need, I'll get there myself," but seeing the stern faces of the guards surrounding me, I instantly panicked and became confused. "Jin Yao, I really won't try to escape again, I swear. There's no point in this anymore," I muttered frantically. "Okay, just listen," she snapped. I had no choice but to obey the bodyguard and climb into the cramped transport van, plunging into darkness. From the monotonous hum of the engine, I guessed that I was being taken back to Jin Yao's estate, although due to the tight bandage on my head, I could not see anything around me. The exact location of the estate was still a mystery to me. Apparently, Jin Yao had deliberately kept it a secret to eliminate any thoughts of escape. Now I belonged entirely to her, becoming the center of her world and my own. The heavy iron door clanged dully, and the pungent smell of coal filled my nostrils. I've clearly been brought to Jin Yao's private quarters, but the blindfold hasn't been removed yet. Why is there an iron door in her room anyway? After an agonizing moment, the hood was finally torn off. It was Sister Wang, bringing a bowl of the coveted soup. The same heavy door loomed darkly nearby. Only then did I realize I was in Jin Yao's bedroom. "Where is she? Why didn't she come herself?" I asked. "Master is temporarily busy with business. She might be back later this evening. She told me to feed you some soup first," the woman explained. "Okay, then I'll wait for her here," I replied, surprisingly cheerful. Since Jin Yao had urgent matters to attend to, I decided to let things slide and wait for her. "Okay, but the mistress is unpredictable and will be back late," Sister Wang warned. "Are you sure you want to wait, Mr. Xiang? Please remember this once and for all. It's best not to disobey your mistress." I bit my lip guiltily, so she did let me leave the horse farm after all. "Is there any bread here? If I get hungry, I'll eat. Thank you, Sister Wang." "If it weren't for you, I definitely wouldn't have survived her wrath." "Stop it, Mr. Xiang, just try to live peacefully." "You know, this is the most I can do to help," Sister Wang sighed, lowering the thick curtains and plunging the room into pitch darkness once again. It was hard to even roll over in the cramped, dark space, but curling up, I quickly fell asleep. I woke to the loud click of a woman's heel on the parquet floor and the sound of running water in the bathroom. Jin Yao had returned. A bright light hit my eyes, forcing me to squeeze them shut. Pretending to be a sleepy fly, I muttered through my teeth, "My dear, I was just sleeping," going to the toilet. The thought of her disappearing again was more terrifying than death. But as soon as Jin Yao cracked the door into the dark space, I obediently hurried back to my assigned corner. Once I was close, I instinctively hugged her and kissed her, feeling that deep down she was still attached to me. Although her methods were cruel, there was clearly a struggle going on in her heart, but the next moment she pushed me away without explanation, provoking a new quarrel. "Can I at least touch you? Now is not the time. Behave obediently and return to where you belong." Tong Jin Yao did not tolerate objections, and arguing with her was useless. I had to meekly return to the dark room, waiting for the iron door to close. "I heard you wanted to wait for me," she said in a softened tone, clearly confident that I had nowhere else to run. "You've been eating better because you feel my love, right?" Jin Yao gave me a warm, almost sincere smile for the first time in a long time. The smile of someone truly attached. Soon, Sister Wang appeared with a fresh bowl of hot soup, handed it to Jin Yao, and quietly left. Jin Yao, who was actively tending to me, made sure that I obediently lay down on the bed, and soon her even breathing filled the room. Having fallen asleep next to me, she looked surprisingly serene. The word sweet hardly suited the imperious mistress of the estate, but now I simply had no other epithets to describe her fragility in sleep. She was still terrified of my escape, even despite my vows. Having once dropped a careless lie, I had forever undermined her trust. The next morning, Jin Yao, usually a very light sleeper, personally unlocked the iron door. I couldn't wait to get out and stretch my aching muscles. But as soon as I caught her piercing gaze, all my ambitious plans vanished. "Come out and see how smart you are today," she grinned. By allowing me to stay close, she seemed to be testing my strength, but step by step our relationship really warmed up. I sincerely believed that just a little more and this fragile peace would become permanent, freeing us both from the nightmares of the past. For the first time in a long time, I was allowed to have breakfast with her at the common table. This sudden favor made me dizzy, and I quickly stuck my fork into a piece of birthday cake. As I handed it to her, I noticed Jin Yao, without taking her eyes off her phone, instinctively part her lips and then said with a slight smile, "Are you trying to please me?" "Sorry, I was just afraid to say too much because of memory lapses. Am I being pathetic?" My fingers were visibly shaking. "No, you're not pathetic, so you're not afraid of me anymore." A curiosity flashed in her eyes, to which I didn't know how to answer. "Don't be afraid, I'll feed you myself. Open your mouth." She looked after me so tenderly that Sister Wang, who was watching, couldn't help but smile like a mother. If only we could always get along like this. I swore to myself to forget about running away, but is it possible to fully earn trust after everything I've done? After breakfast, Jin Yao left again to run errands, returning me to my room first. Passing the cursed iron door, I merely sighed heavily and meekly stepped inside. "You were so sweet and shy, Xiangyang. Sometimes I wish I could shrink you down and carry you around with me every day so we wouldn't have to part," she said as a parting shot. "But what if I need to go to the bathroom again?" I asked timidly. "Yeah, that's a problem. You'll have to wait until I get back." "Don't you dare dirty my room," she added sternly before slamming the door. It's easy to say, be patient, when you're locked within four walls. Thoughts of escape began to swarm in his head again. Perhaps even on the horse farm there was more space and freedom, although Sister Wang's care sometimes softened the loneliness. Sister Wang, who had come to me with another helping of help and handed me an empty Coke bottle for emergency needs, sympathetically shook her head. "Mr. Xiang, maybe I should try to put in a good word for you." I smiled bitterly in response, not blaming her at all for what was happening. She had only her own lies and her insane, all-consuming obsession to blame. After all, last night she had slept soundly and peacefully for the first time in 3 years. And all this was solely because I was nearby. The realization of this fact evoked in me a strange, ambivalent feeling. Most of the time, Mistress only manages to fall asleep thanks to pills, Mr. Xiang. Don't disappoint her. For all her outward strength, she remains a woman who desperately needs warmth and love. The agonizing wait within four walls dragged on, and now only Jin Yao held the key to my freedom. But that night she never showed up, leaving me alone in the silence, occasionally interrupted by Sister Wang's visits with food. Loneliness weighed heavily on her psyche, but the next day the door opened silently. Jin Yao, looking deathly glared at, silently stepped into the room. "Just go to bed and ignore me," I snapped, but her long absence still got to me. "Where have you been all this time? Since when do you dare interrogate me?" she snapped coldly. "Don't I have the right to ask? You're my woman and I'm locked up here." I flared up, feeling like a child overwhelmed by jealousy and resentment. "Haha, are you jealous? Okay, I think I'll go find someone else," Jin Yao said sarcastically. "Don't you dare," escaped my lips. My words hurt her deeply, but instead of answering, she only sighed. "Stupid. I didn't sleep all night, sorting out things, and instead of gratitude, you're interrogating me." It then dawned on me that her recent comments about women's ailments meant there was no question of any dates. I had simply worked myself up out of the heat of the moment for no reason. Noticing my embarrassment, she didn't even get angry. "I'm sorry, Jin Yao, I was wrong. I lost my temper out of stupidity," I quickly apologized, trying to smooth things over. If an apology solved everything, then what's the point of punishment? She chuckled and yanked the cord of the black curtain sharply, plunging the room into impenetrable darkness and leaving me alone with the sounds of her heavy breathing. Having spent the whole day in hunger and confinement, I was released only in the evening, when Jin Yao, having finally slept, deigned to share dinner with me. My life had become a harsh monotony. Sun, air, food, and freedom, everything existed solely within the framework of her permission, and breaking out of this circle seemed impossible. Perhaps this was her master plan, to tie me to her so tightly that even the thought of leaving would be terrifying. After dinner, she nodded silently to me to follow her on an evening stroll around the estate. I desperately wanted to take her hand as before, but the fear of punishment paralyzed my movements. I obediently trailed behind her until she suddenly turned around. "What, are you still afraid, or should I put you on a leash again?" she asked mockingly, but the next moment she grabbed my hand. "I just want you to learn a lesson. Any attempt at lying or running away will cost you dearly," she added quietly, making me feel like I was being targeted again. My legs were so weak that they could barely hold me up, and Jin Yao helped me up to the hill, where we stopped briefly at her signal, counting down the minutes until our obligatory return. Returning to my room, I collapsed onto my bed, thinking wistfully about how out of touch I had become with simple human movements, until Sister Wang's soft voice brought me back to reality. "You need to get ready, Mr. Xiang. The mistress is hosting an important business reception and is taking you along," she said, startling me. But my punishment isn't over yet. Panicking, I jumped to my feet. "If I run away, there's no turning back, Xiangyang. Either you obey or you'll lose your legs." It sounded like a death sentence, although deep down there was still a tiny chance. "I'll go with you. I swear I'll be quiet," I blurted out, mustering up my courage. Jin Yao looked at me appraisingly, then pulled out that ominous remote control from her pocket. "Go change and don't be silly, Xiangyang. You don't want to test this thing on yourself again, do you? I'm taking you with me, hoping for your sincerity," she said coldly. On her orders, Sister Wang brought over several luxurious suits, and after the stylist's work, I again looked like the young heir of a wealthy family, and Jin Yao personally helped me fasten the last button. After taking a souvenir photo, she smiled. "All these clothes were waiting for you, and they suit you very well." Even Sister Wang surreptitiously smiled as she looked at us. This transformation seemed like a ticket from hell back to heaven. After all the circles of humiliation, she once again enveloped me in luxury and the illusion of care, forcing me to balance on the edge between mad passion and fear. Finding myself in a spacious Laotian restaurant where part of the evening was spent, I sadly thought that before such a quantity of exquisite dishes it would have been worthwhile to go a little less hungry. Jin Yao didn't seem to share my appetite at all. Her attention was riveted to what was happening around her, and her fingers were nervously clutching that very remote control, ready to press the button at any moment at the slightest suspicion. Wanting to check if she was dozing, I gently touched her hand, but Jin Yao immediately seized the initiative. "What are you planning, Xiangyang?" she said through clenched teeth with icy calm. "Nothing, I was just checking to make sure everything was okay," I babbled in fear, and she just sighed heavily and shifted the remote control to her other hand. Half an hour later, under heavy guard, we arrived at the main dinner party, where Jin Yao confidently led me into the crowd of influential guests, holding my hand tightly. The banquet was replete with expensive wines and delicacies, but I had no time for food. A glass of red wine only strengthened the uneasy feeling that this evening was preparing some kind of sophisticated trap. Jin Yao's appearance caused a sensation. Shenzhen's elite lined up, hoping to get even a fleeting photo or a chance at a lucrative partnership with her. But then a familiar and unpleasant voice came from the crowd. "Oh, Mr. Xiang, what a surprise. I didn't expect to find you hiding behind a woman." It sounded loud and brazen. Standing before me was Su Cheng, a spoiled brat from an influential family, whose gaming company I had once foolishly bought for 300 million yuan, getting into a huge financial mess. Meeting this man threatened to be a complete disaster, and if it weren't for Jin Yao's presence, I would definitely have suffered from his ridicule. Jin Yao's face instantly froze. In her world, no one had ever dared to speak to her in such a tone. The banquet hall instantly plunged into an eerie, ringing silence. The surrounding businessmen immediately began to whisper, condemning the impudent youth, but Su Cheng, intoxicated by impunity, only got carried away. "Hey, this poor guy is simply up to his ears in debt to me. You brought her here to curry favor, right? And you yourself are just a common bankrupt trying to sell yourself at a higher price. Su Cheng continued to cackle, completely confused about who he was dealing with. I went cold with horror, realizing that his words could destroy the fragile truce between me and Jin Yao, turning my life into an absolute nightmare. Be careful on the turns, boy. My father is the head of an influential clan in Shancheng, Su Cheng challenged, noticing my fear. Wow, the Su family itself is from Shancheng, Jin Yao suddenly laughed, but it sent shivers down her spine. And how are you going to deal with my man? Yes, I'll buy him a car, a house, and pay off all his debts to you. Just don't let this loser fool you. Su Cheng continued to spout nonsense. I was ready to sink into the ground from fear, expecting the worst outcome for myself. Jin Yao slowly pulled out her phone, made one call, and said coldly, "In 3 hours, I want to see the Su family in Shancheng completely bankrupt." The guests around her froze, thinking it was a joke, but her eyes made it clear she wasn't joking. Su Cheng turned pale but tried to continue clowning around as his entourage panicked and tried to drag him away from the storm's epicenter. I knew what such threats meant when she carried them out, and my legs began to tremble slightly with the awareness of the impending catastrophe. Jin Yao cast a heavy, unreadable glance at me and quietly said, "It seems like someone has completely forgotten how to appreciate my kindness, Zhang Yang." Jin Yao, don't listen to his nonsense, I'll explain everything. I tried to justify myself, feeling the microsensors of the remote control in her hand begin to heat up. Don't waste your breath, better get something to eat before you go, because after tonight you might not have that chance again, she said icily. These words made my blood run cold. I understood the meaning of the phrase about not being able to eat all too well, because her words contained an unambiguous hint that I might not get out of this story alive. Force yourself to eat it since you ordered it, Jin Yao said coldly, leaving me no choice. I had to pick up a fork and dig into these mountains of delicacies, even though there was a lump in my throat. The sumptuous banquet continued, and since I was already condemned to death in the eyes of this tyrant, it would be a sin to miss the chance to eat my fill before the end. The deathly silence that reigned in the hall seemed tangible. Everyone present froze, and Jin Yao's former business partners quickly disappeared, afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. 10 minutes later, that fateful telephone call rang out, louder than thunder in the silence of the banquet hall. Jin Yao's face changed subtly, and I was instantly forbidden from even thinking about continuing the dinner, forced to kneel right in front of her. "Oh, young Master Su, please stand up. I feel so embarrassed to accept your apology," I muttered deliriously, remembering the old men's stories about red envelopes filled with money, until someone's voice brought me back to reality. "Mr. Xiang, are you in your right mind? I beg you, let this terrible woman let us go," Su Cheng lamented, lying at Jin Yao's feet while the persistent smell of expensive lobster continued to make me sick. "I can't stand it when annoying flies buzz around my ear," Jin Yao muttered, thrusting the fork straight into my tongue, piercing it clean through. The pain was excruciating, comparable to the harpoon strike when catching a large fish. Not expecting such cruelty, I instinctively grabbed her hand, trying to stop the bleeding. "You hate flies, so why are you hitting me?" Torturing my own tongue, I felt like a madman, but I didn't dare harm Jin Yao herself, so I angrily kicked Su Jia, who was sitting next to me. "This is all because of you, you freak. Mr. Xiang, I won't do it again, just forgive me," he howled, crawling back. "Did you hear that? My boy told you to get out of my sight," Jin Yao said coldly, nodding to her bodyguard to escort the insolent man down the stairs. The bodyguard sent Su Cheng flying with one powerful kick, completely turning the elite dinner into a theater of the absurd. None of Shenzhen's elite dared to utter a peep or try to intercede. Jin Yao's reputation as a cold-blooded executioner struck a primal terror into everyone. It was clear that behind her flawless facade were hidden dozens of broken lives, but after today's show performance, her authority became absolute. "Let's go home," she said with a frightening smile that made my insides clench with apprehension. "Jin Yao, it hurts. Please slow down," I begged. There was a distinct smell of iron and blood in my mouth, but she only pulled me along with her with greater force, ignoring my tears. "One more sound and I'll rip your tongue out by the roots," she whispered in my ear so convincingly that I had to shut up and obediently get into the car. Jin Yao suddenly let out a scream, pulling the bloody fork out of her mouth, giving vent to her pent-up pain. "Why do you always try to betray me? Didn't I love you enough?" Tears rolled down her face, but the next moment the lust for murder flared up in her eyes again. I'll kill you, you bastard, she screamed, raising that very fork over my neck. A centimeter from the fatal blow, she froze abruptly, then with a feral cry, plunged the blade into her thigh. The smell of fresh blood instantly filled the cramped interior of the car. Jin Yao, are you crazy? I screamed, grabbing her hand and trying to stop the bleeding. No matter how much she'd been torturing me lately, the sight of her own wounds tore my heart apart. Having somehow dragged her to the estate, I immediately called Sister Wang and the family doctor to bandage the crazy mistress. Sitting with a detached expression while being bandaged, Jin Yao looked utterly miserable and lonely, causing a strange, perverse desire to hug her and pity her. Jin Yao, my dear, don't do that again, I whispered, touching her silky skin, but in response she looked at me with the gaze of a predator, ready to tear its prey to pieces. Baby, are you trying to comfort me? Don't forget who you're talking to, she chuckled. I don't care who you are, you're my woman, I blurted out, overcome with emotion. Do you think pompous words will erase the fact that you had affairs with others? She retorted coldly, cutting off any attempts to smooth things over. I'll accept any punishment, just stop hurting yourself, I gave in. She darkened. I've changed my mind about punishing you, but those women you touched will answer for everything. Do you remember them? Jin Yao, you can't kill them. They're not guilty of anything. I was just talking to them on business, I shouted, realizing the depth of her paranoia. Only now did it dawn on me. If she had easily dug up all my background from 3 years ago, then getting rid of me or my acquaintances was a matter of a couple of minutes for her. This means that all these 3 years I was on a short leash, and the very illusion of freedom was only part of her sophisticated game. The brain was feverishly thinking, realizing that it would not be possible to hide one's past sins for long, and the ending of this story would be bloody. Tired? Come to me, my little fugitive, Jin Yao said gently but threateningly, noticing the cold sweat on my forehead. Pretending to be submissive, I asked to go out into the fresh air, supposedly to come to my senses, while I frantically looked for a loophole to escape. But as soon as I took a step toward the exit, a familiar, hellish pain in my chest knocked me off my feet. A hidden sensor had been triggered. Jin Yao, please stop, I'm not going anywhere, I screamed, writhing on the floor. Go back to your cage where you belong, came the final verdict, and the heavy door slammed behind me like a coffin lid. Half an hour later, a pale assistant entered the room with a skein of cloth in his hands. Mr. Xiang, the mistress ordered, to prepare everything for the demonstration lesson. Are you going to kill those women? Jin Yao is crazy. I won't let innocent people be maimed because of me anymore, I screamed hysterically, feeling the guilt eating me up from the inside. Ha ha ha, you better think about yourself, Mr. Xiang, because your calculation will soon come to an end, the assistant said coldly under her Olympian gaze. Kill me if you want, but let them go, I begged, ready to endure any torture for the sake of saving someone else. Okay, I will take your sacrifice into account, Jin Yao's cold voice rang out as she gave the order to wipe the blood off the floor. Mr. Xiang is stubborn and doesn't appreciate kindness, but we'll fix that once and for all, the assistant reported, leading me deeper into the medical block. Sister Wang tried to intercede, but was rudely thrown out of the room, leaving me alone to face the inevitable. She wouldn't dare to really kill me. I'm her favorite boy, I tried to convince myself in a trembling voice as I was dragged to the operating room. But reality turned out to be much more terrifying than my wildest fantasies. I was forcibly pinned to a cold metal bed. The same nurse leaned over my face, but now, instead of a frightening mask, her face was adorned with a wide, almost insane smile. Handsome, don't worry, the procedure will be quick, she sang, laying out the instruments. What are you going to do? Call Jin Yao, I shouted. The mistress is busy with much more important matters. She said to deal with you quickly, otherwise the dinner will get cold, she said indifferently, preparing the stun gun. Wait, listen to me, I tried to fight back, but the nurse's eyes reflected only the professional indifference of an executioner. You know, you're cute, it's a shame to waste you just like that. She suddenly changed her anger to mercy, leaning closer. Want a deal? Be my boyfriend for the next 30 minutes and I'll give you the most painless death of your life. How's that for? The nurse suddenly touched my head, trying to calm me down just before the end, perhaps the best thing she could have done for me. But my brain, faced with death, was working at its limits, and I understood the absurdity of the situation perfectly well. Beauty, you won't succeed, you won't finish me off that easily. I closed my eyes silently, meekly awaiting my fate. After all, isn't this what you've been trying to achieve all this time? Am I not good enough? The nurse whispered, bowing her head and pressing her enticing lips very close to my face. Her voice was tinged with irritation, for despite all of Jingyao's cruelty to me, she never allowed anyone else to even touch me. No outsider would dare do this. You know full well what her family is capable of. Take even a step toward me, and the next price you'll pay for your insolence will be your own blood. So I advise you to be extremely careful. Ha ha ha, Jingyao, come here quickly. Just look at how obedient your boy is. Against all common sense, the nurse dared to loudly call Jingyao by name. Such a brazen tone clearly promised serious trouble. The heavy operating room door swung open, and Jingyao gave the nurse a faint smile. "Thank you, King Lian," she said, enveloping the girl in a grateful embrace. Apparently, it really is good for guys to be quiet sometimes to avoid incurring wrath. "Oh, come on, it's nothing. Have fun as much as you like." King Lian laughed flippantly and headed for the operating room exit, and the name King Lian itself sounded quite pleasant. At one point, I even felt like I was having a sweet conversation with King Lian about some romantic affair. As soon as I was born, Jingyao immediately gently touched my face and stopped any further inconsistencies. "What's wrong? Are you attracted to my girl again? It seems like there's still too much wind blowing around in your head to blurt out such things." No, frankly, I'm completely out of control right now," Jingyao said, suddenly changing her tone to serious. "No, I'm telling the truth. I was just thinking that I wouldn't let anyone bully you or you'd be really upset. Although I admit I expressed myself rather harshly back then. Few normal guys would have been able to keep their cool in a situation like this. I was simply desperately trying to survive and emerge victorious, even though a shred of common sense told me that if I decided to betray my feelings now, it could very well be a cunning trap set by Jingyao. "I think I'll stay with Momo this time since you've saved me yet again. Do you forgive me?" escaped my lips before I could think. Jingyao only smiled faintly, biting her tongue mischievously. Pretending that this was the plan, she paused briefly, then rose to her feet, gathered her things, casually untied me and commanded, "Let's go." "King Lian is still waiting for us to share a meal. Who are you even talking about?" I asked anxiously, feeling completely overwhelmed by the information overload. Not only was she continuing to keep me captive, she was also dragging me out to dinner with her friend. I was literally going crazy from what was happening around me, but Jingyao and I had once again reached some kind of silent agreement. To hell with this bloody soup, I don't understand anything anymore. Let him figure it out himself. Okay, so a regular hot pot doesn't sound so bad after all. Having calmed my nerves a bit, I obediently followed her out of the operating room. "Listen, here's the deal. Just follow me and stop getting worked up over trifles," she said, leading me into the spacious restaurant hall where a nurse was already waiting for us. Or rather, not her anymore. More precisely, it was definitely that same King Lian, but without her work uniform. She'd traded it for a seductive black dress. She propped her leg up on a chair and cast an appraising glance at us, and the sight of it once again overwhelmed me with a storm of emotion. "If you don't get out of here right now, I'll definitely go crazy in this cramped space," I muttered. Meanwhile, Jingyao had come closer and casually sat right on my lap. "What are you thinking? The last thing we need is for someone to catch us like this," I said indignantly, catching her glance. "Let them look, I don't care," she dismissed nonchalantly. "It's just that anyone who tries to stare at my boyfriend usually loses bone mass quickly," King Lian added with a sly smile. "Hey, stop making fun of my son-in-law. You two are simply unbearable. I can't take it anymore. Just don't do anything like that to me, it will hurt." Although, judging by King Lian's words, she clearly found this process fascinating. "You'll say too much." My tongue felt stuck to the roof of my mouth, and any attempts to object were met with a dead end. I was sweating from the tension, but I couldn't shake this obsession. "Perhaps you could offer me something else in return." "Men's lips aren't made for such nonsense," Jingyao snapped coldly. "I'm just joking. Can't you see how nervous he is? Okay, son-in-law, let me treat you to some potatoes instead." King Lian took pity. She brought a piece to my mouth, and I obediently parted my lips, finally preparing to take the bite. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a delighted Jingyao enthusiastically capturing the moment on her phone camera. "Are you seriously taking a picture of this?" Jingyao immediately turned to me with a sour expression. "It seems the grudge still lingers. Shut up and continue sitting still." To which King Lian, enjoying her meal, merely chuckled. In my mind, I've already managed to recall King Lian's ancestors back 18 generations, even though I've done nothing wrong to her personally. Why the hell did she decide to set me up like this? Now stay in your room and don't show your face. Jing Yao looked incredibly pleased. Serves him right, maybe he'll gain some sense now. Look at him wanting to feast like everyone else. I no longer tried to sort out her relationship with that girl. After all, it certainly wasn't my fault in this whole mess. I certainly didn't have the courage to chase her friend away. She'd been harassing me all the way to the restaurant, and I was afraid to even move my chopsticks. Realizing there was no point in arguing, I meekly said, okay, I'm going back to my room. My appetite had completely vanished, so all I could do was return to my assigned room and flick through the TV channels out of boredom. At that moment, a breaking news report caught my attention. The announcer reported that Shanshan's wealthiest man had suddenly declared bankruptcy, and all his business assets had been frozen. Furthermore, the body of the young heir of the Su family had been found in the river that morning. The official explanation was suicide due to overwhelming debt. It all happened too quickly and unexpectedly. The once powerful Su family collapsed overnight, not even lasting a night. How much influence and brutality would it take to wipe out an entire clan with such traditions? The answer was obvious. Jinniao was clearly involved, and this woman was truly terrifying. Outside, Jinniao continued whispering something to King Lian, and I had no idea what they were thinking. Surely this King Lian and her friend were worth each other. Succumbing to curiosity, I quietly opened the door just a crack. I really wanted to eavesdrop on their conversation. Oh, I'm having so much fun, you can't even imagine how bored I was, but my little boy has finally become soft, I heard snatches of phrases. Do you know why? Because this patient is constantly plagued by stubbornness. You're always fighting with him. The slightest slack and he's back at it again, and you have to put him in his place. But now my house is perfectly tidy and clean. If you don't believe me, come in and check it out yourself. It's probably shaking in its room right now. My personal green lotus in a pot. Well, yes, he's sitting quietly in his little kennel, Jinniao chuckled maliciously. I bet that green lotus doesn't even dare utter a peep right now. Jinniao waved her hand dismissively. Boring, let's bet on your man instead. If I lose, I'll let you mess around with him all day, but if you lose, the rights go to me. Go away, you found a toy, Jinniao retorted cheerfully. I'm just terribly curious if he's really that in awe of you. Deciding not to tempt fate any further, I immediately jumped away from the door. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw King Lian rise from his seat and head straight for my room. I panicked and hid in the farthest corner. The last thing I needed was to completely lose the last of my self-respect after Jinniao finished me off. After all, pride is pride, but I want to live more. And how could I possibly end up with this crazy mafia woman? The door creaked softly and King Lian appeared in the doorway. She cast a mocking glance at me and drawled, "Wow, look at this quiet one. He's a master of hiding in corners. Do you want me to save you?" Anything but that. This girl clearly played by some crazy rules of her own, and I would have regretted it 1,000 times over if I had trusted her with anything. King Lian categorically forbade me to enter the dark room, but as soon as she turned away, I immediately locked the door from the inside and began to think frantically. Obey her, SHHH. Picking up the dropped key, I tiptoed around the room. I felt for the keys in my pocket and was ready to slip out. What idiotic thought had entered my head? Did I really believe she would dare to get me out? How naive of me. Why would the girl Jinniao help me? I clearly overestimated my own charm, and there was probably some trick to her intentions. The last thing I needed was to make my already dire situation worse, even though I was starting to feel sick from the idleness here. Leaning my back against the door, I imperceptibly fell into a heavy, half-asleep haze, completely losing track of time. A sharp knock on the door instantly pulled me out of my slumber. Damn it, was it Jinniao who came to interrogate me? What if King Lian took the keys? Had that traitor really tricked me? Jinniao stood in the doorway, coldly eyeing the iron door. Without thinking twice, she immediately dialed King Lian's number. Stop messing around and give me back the keys. Your son-in-law is already tired of waiting in the restroom, she said bluntly, not at all embarrassed by the wording. So, it turns out Jinniao is actually worried about me since she came looking for me. And even though she practically acknowledged me as her husband between the lines, damn it, that sounded damn nice. Although it was hardly part of some innocent game. You shameless thing, the moment I left, you can't live without me anymore. King Lian's caustic laughter came over the speaker. You little brat, you know perfectly well you're up to something nasty, Jinniao fumed in response. Get the keys here right now, I'm telling you, Jinniao barked into the phone, losing her last shreds of patience. I really want to sleep. I'll send it to you tomorrow, good night, Kinglian said and hung up with the nonchalant air of a seasoned playboy. Jingyao remained lying on the bed, seething with anger. This girl was always acting out, but Jingyao couldn't really punish her. After all, they'd been friends since childhood, closer than sisters. And with her capricious sister, there was only one thing to do, patiently indulge her antics. Suddenly, Jingyao's gaze fell on the heavy iron door. It seemed like a thought had dawned on me, even though quite a bit of time had passed since I was locked up here. Finally, Jingyao returned to bed, settling herself comfortably and getting ready to turn off the light. Hey Jingyao, are you even going to drag me out of here? And by the way, have you by any chance forgotten that I'm still hungry? I couldn't help but get indignant. What a tedious boy you are, she snapped back. But okay, I'm in a good mood today, so your big sister will spoil you with something tasty. So, do you agree? Jinniao, did you really come up with this yourself? Frankly, I never expected that despite her status, she would personally cook for me, although she was a pretty good cook. After an agonizing half hour, with hunger already rising in her throat, Jinniao finally appeared at the door. She held a plate of some strange mess in her hands. What the hell is that? I stared incredulously at the semblance of noodles in her hands, feeling my appetite vanish completely. Noodles mixed with fruit salad, it's an acquired taste, to say the least, but what can you do? However, this crazy choice perfectly reflected Jinniao's unpredictable nature. After feeding me, she immediately collapsed onto the bed, without saying a word about how she planned to free me from captivity. Losing all patience, Jinniao flicked the switch, plunging the room into darkness. Are you kidding me? What else do you want in the middle of the night? Her nervous hunger made the food stick in her throat. It seemed that this time all I could do was admit defeat and mentally continue cursing all 18 generations of this abnormal Kinglian's ancestors, anticipating a new disturbing day. The next morning, I burst into Jingyao's room without knocking. I think that was the main privilege of being a best friend, to burst into his room at any time of the day or night without warning. Jingyao, frightened, pulled the blanket up to her chin and hissed, "Are you crazy? What if someone thinks there's a man in the room with me? Get out immediately." Hey, take it easy. Your son-in-law definitely won't do anything to you now. I'm a man of my word. Author's blank paragraph for dramatic effect. Wait, could you express yourself a little more politely? And anyway, why the hell are you showing up at my place so early? Jinniao asked with feigned calm. I have some most unpleasant news to report. I've managed to lose the key to this damned iron door. It looks like now only your adopted son-in-law will be able to open it, although this won't affect the functionality of the door itself. What the hell are you doing? Are you completely nuts? Okay, forget it. I'll ask someone else to pick this lock another time. Another time? You mean not today? I was simply speechless at such impudence. I never thought Jinniao could screw up so ineptly. What do you know? This lock and door are made of a special alloy. Ordinary tools can't take them apart. Well, since there's nothing else to do, let's go horseback riding. I haven't been to your horse farm in ages, Kinglian suggested unexpectedly, managing to maintain her sense of amusement in this situation. You better hurry up and figure out how to get me out of this hole, I muttered to Kinglian with barely concealed resentment. This girl was clearly up to no good, acting on her own malicious intent. I mentally ran through all the options, trying to figure out how I could possibly upset this little demon in a skirt, who did nothing but ruin people's lives professionally. Kinglian slipped a note with a phone number into my hand and whispered, "Consider your life now in your own hands. Why am I helping you? Poor thing, Jingyao definitely doesn't deserve this treatment. You're so sweet. If you manage to escape and Jingyao gets wind of who helped you, remember this number, head straight to the capital and call me. I'll meet you." Did she really like me so much that she'd do anything for me? A fire-resistant, reliable, and loyal friend. The offers kept pouring in, one after another. Jingyao apparently had no idea what was happening. Kinglian lightly touched my chin and smiled slyly, noticing that Jingyao was about to wash up. Kinglian pulled away abruptly, plopped down on the bed, and pretended to stare at her phone's screen. "Okay, we're going," she shouted. "Let's go," Jinniao responded, pulling her friend out the door. With the loud sound of the lock slamming shut, I found myself locked within four walls again. Could Kinglian really have developed feelings for me and wanted to escape? I really wanted to believe it, but a voice inside me told me there was a catch, another trap set by both of them. After all, a beautiful woman will always find a pretext for a beautiful lie. I didn't want to fall for the bait, and would it really be that easy to escape Jingyao? Besides, why would I even run if this rich woman would soon be under my thumb? Having reasoned thus, I carefully tucked the treasured key deep into the folds of my clothes and simply swallowed the note with the number. All that remained was to patiently await Jingyao's return, which didn't take long before lunch. This time, she brought me a whole set of cute lunch boxes, clearly not prepared by her own hands. I wonder where King Lian is. Why didn't she join you? I asked, trying to feign indifference as we ate. She went away on urgent business. What did you miss her without her company? Jingyao narrowed her eyes suspiciously. God forbid, nothing of the sort. Was King Lian really trying to save me? If so, my ingratitude might have offended her. And if she harbored a grudge, expect serious trouble if she decided to dump everything on Jingyao. Fortunately, the next phone call from King Lian was surprisingly peaceful. King Lian, have you changed your mind about flying? Why are you calling? Just wanted to check on my dear son-in-law's health. Is he angry by any chance? Thank you, your son-in-law is doing just fine. He's eating and sleeping, though they won't let him do anything else. After hearing my rebuke, King Lian burst into carefree laughter. You know, I was originally going to give the keys to my sister to see if you'd run away. I didn't expect you to be such a good boy. You've definitely earned a chicken leg for dinner. Seriously? Jingyao hung up and stared at me with a strange, heavy gaze. Realizing the situation was getting tense, I quickly pulled the treasured keys from my pocket and laid them out in front of her. You're smart enough, but you don't have the sense to use them, alas. Did you seriously expect to find a way to escape? How cruel of you to suspect your own wife. Well, I forgot to give them to you the first time, honestly. Heh, and you think I'm going to believe this nonsense? Jingyao looked at me as if I were a hardened criminal caught red-handed. That look instantly left me speechless. I couldn't tell the truth. If I'd admitted that King Lian had tried to turn me in, I'd have had to flee with her, but that traitor had washed her hands of it at the right moment. Beautiful women are not only masterful liars, but also let you down at the most crucial moment. Realizing that my only chance for freedom was once again in Jinyao's hands, I sighed heavily. Feeling a wave of despair, I leaned my back against the cold metal of the door, exhausted. Jinyao smiled wryly and said, It seems life in isolation has been nothing but good for you since you've got so much free time now. I'll have to come up with a new punishment for you. Bracing myself for the worst, I squeezed my eyes shut, meekly awaiting fate's verdict. Aren't you even going to try to beg me for mercy? Watch out, or I really will break your fragile heart. If you're so keen to make fun of me over some nonsense, go ahead and do whatever you want, I said proudly. It was said with youthful abandon, but hurtful tears welled up involuntarily. Don't grown men cry when they're pushed to the brink. Oh, I'm so sorry, you're still just a child, don't cry, stop being so wet, Jinyao softened, gently wiping away my tears with her fingers. As soon as I looked up at that stern yet incredibly attractive face, all my confidence evaporated. Hey, I'm actually still really mad at you. At that moment, the heavy door clicked open. Jinyao had indeed turned the key and unlocked it. Come on out, you scared the living daylights out of me with your face. Do I look like a monster? You almost gave me a heart attack just now. Jingyao, seeing me frozen in surprise, jokingly tried to slam the door back. I panicked and rushed forward to the bathroom as fast as I could because it was physically impossible to hold back any longer. The commotion made Jingyao laugh heartily. Perhaps, as a sign of reconciliation after everything she's been through, I'll have to buy her Coke by the case. Come on, Jinyao, can't you just let me live a normal life? I swear by all that's holy, I won't even look at the exit again, I pleaded, sensing the threatening undertone in her words. Is that all you wanted to say? Go ahead, keep making excuses. No, not another word. This room really is simply magnificent, spacious, bright, and very cozy, I quickly assured her with all my heart. Well, since it's finally sunk in, learn to appreciate what you have. That's what 10 million went on, and it still looks worse than a rundown villa. I'm tempted to scold her for such a botched job. Each room costs an insane million per square meter with no proper preparation or practical use. She'd be better off buying a proper villa and simply locking me in the basement. At least a dark room would look much more impressive for that kind of money. Listen, maybe we should go for a walk in the fresh air. I quickly changed the subject, terrified that she'd decide to drag me off to some remote place again. How naive to think that as soon as I let you out, you'd immediately run back into a trap. Let's just take a walk off to the bathroom to freshen up. Freshened up, I tried to seize the initiative and go on the offensive, rushing out like an enraged dog. Like a dog stuck between the worlds of the living and the dead, and the inevitable result of this attempt was a hefty slap in the face. Seriously, am I even allowed to decide anything? Lie down now. This is a complete failure. Despite the end of my imprisonment, I still couldn't escape the fate of a prisoner, although Jinniao generously supplied me with 2 large cans of cola. Once outside, I looked around in confusion. What meeting had I even planned to attend? Once again, I was left completely alone. Once again, I had to resign myself and allow Jingyao to continue keeping me under lock and key. At that moment, for the first time, I bitterly regretted not trusting Kinglian. No matter how cynical and unreliable she acted, the presence of this crazy girl at least brightened the gray everyday life. Besides, Kinglian was every bit as attractive as Jinniao, and she was incredibly rich. Come to think of it. Wang Jai suddenly arrived with food, immediately reminding me that it was time for dinner. After devouring another helping of the dish, I completely lost my appetite. Why hasn't Jingyao returned yet? The lady of the house is away on business again. It looks like her business trip will drag on for at least a week this time. What should I do now? How am I supposed to survive a whole week? Get the medicine now and unlock the door. A person needs to eat and drink. Those are basic physiological needs, and I can't possibly meet them in captivity. Wang Jai just spread his hands helplessly, but this moment made me think about his phone. Wang Jai hides Xiangyang in the secret room at the horse farm. Besides you, only a couple of bodyguards are allowed to know about this, and not a single living soul, including Kinglian, is allowed to know about his hideout. I'll send you the gate key later. Jinyao's voice suddenly came over the phone. I didn't care anymore that Wang Jai had hung up because my chest tightened with anxiety. Something truly serious had apparently happened, since she continued to worry about me even from a distance. Even though the iron gates had opened, I was still being transported to another secret hideout. I chuckled bitterly at my own fate. What freedom of speech was there to speak of? But on the other hand, even in the moment of her greatest crisis, she was thinking of me, which meant I still occupied some place in her heart. Before I could recover, I was once again being loaded into a car with tinted windows. This time, I was placed in a secret room, the existence of which I hadn't even suspected. A bodyguard silently seated me inside and immediately left. Despite its secrecy, the room was fully furnished with furniture and appliances, but there was no cell phone or internet service, turning the room into a bunker isolated from the outside world. Nevertheless, it was far more comfortable here than in that iron cage, and Wang Jai kept me regularly supplied with fresh food, drinks, and the latest newspapers. The endless stream of thoughts and mental tension gradually dulled, and over time, I even got used to this routine. How many days had passed had Jinniao finally returned? While receiving my next portion of food, I tried to pry any news from the servants about her return. Frankly, if she hadn't shown up soon, I would have completely lost my mind. Who knows, perhaps this was another psychological trap for the prisoner, but the end was clearly near. The mistress will be back soon and let you out. My girl hasn't seen you for so long, you've probably been nagging her too, Auntie Wang said with a motherly smile, going out onto the terrace to hang out the laundry. Had something truly extraordinary happened in her family that she had to personally clean up all this chaos? I knew little about business, but rumors of serious problems within her clan were persistent. What are you even talking about? Doesn't her family consist of just her? Auntie Wang looked at me like I was a complete idiot, sighed heavily, and silently shook her head. Why did this crazy family even notice me? I'm well aware I look like a complete idiot, but there was nothing I could say. After all, I'd been stuck in my own bubble for too long. My intellect wasn't particularly impressive, but my looks were still there. One glance at my reflection was enough to make all the questions disappear. That's the whole story. 10 days flew by in this utter isolation. I read every magazine I'd left behind until it was tattered and pored over every newspaper. Thinking back, I wondered, if I'd been a proper student back then, couldn't I have gone into a proper university and gone a corporate scholarship instead of getting mixed up with these crazy rich people? It must be fate. Just when I was immersed in these gloomy thoughts, the headline of a fresh newspaper that caught my eye after my morning rounds literally stunned me. It read in bold letters, Chairman of Jianan Group unexpectedly jumped out of high-rise window. Cause of tragedy unknown. Jian Banyan, who had headed a thriving corporation whose revenues were breaking all records and whose plans for the year included the listing of 10 subsidiaries on the stock exchange, suddenly committed suicide at the height of its success. The story seemed absurd and brief, but I stared at the article for a solid hour because his last name was Jian. Could the chairman's death have anything to do with Jinniao? This woman's methods were always frighteningly effective. If she wanted to eliminate someone, they would either suddenly commit suicide, die in an accident, or become the victim of violence. Although rumor had it she didn't even spare her own blood relatives. At that moment, the heavy door of the secret room creaked open, and the familiar tap-dancing sound of high heels echoed down the corridor. The sound of the angel of death's footsteps. I immediately collapsed on the bed, pretending to be asleep. how many days have you been gone? Be quiet and get a good night's sleep, my dear, Jinyao's cold voice rang out. What have you been doing all this time? I couldn't help but ask. It's none of your business. Get ready, I'm sending you back. What do you mean back? As your man, I have every right to know, I protested, feeling hurt. Yao, have I really been too soft with you lately? You still dare ask such questions? Stop pretending to be some kind of bossy mistress of life. I just want normal human equality. What the hell do you mean equality if you're still my debtor? Jinyao snapped coldly. And when will this 300 million debt finally give me the right to equal treatment? Apparently the answer to that question was that they were going to lock me in the room again. A heavy sigh escaped my lips. It was useless to resist. All I could do was accept the inevitable for the sake of paying off this damned debt. And yet, I harbored a grudge. So, choosing the moment when Jingyao had let her guard down and seemed most relaxed, I blurted out, "Who is Jianbo?" At that moment, the air in the room literally froze. Jingyao, who was about to leave, suddenly froze in place, and then thunder struck. Before I could blink, a swift blow to the right and left instantly set my cheeks ablaze. Are you completely nuts? Enraged beyond words, Jingyao dug her fingers into my hair and forcefully pulled me back into the dark room. You want to know who Jianbo is? Fine, I'll show you. He's my cousin. And remember once and for all, anyone who dares to stand in my way or look behind me must die, Jingyao hissed, glaring at me. Through the eyes of a madman, I couldn't even tell what angered her more, my inappropriate question at the most inopportune moment or the fact that I'd accidentally touched on her most sensitive topic. But I knew one thing for sure. At that moment, Jingyao looked frighteningly insane, teetering on the brink of human sanity, and my own situation couldn't have been worse. SHH, I get it, I won't ask anymore, calm down, let's just forget about it, I muttered fearfully, trying to somehow alleviate her anger. But the storm in her soul was only gaining momentum, continuing to pull my hair and forcing me to look straight into my eyes. She hissed through her teeth, "Don't think that I'm not capable of finishing you off. Pull one more stunt like that and I'll give you a life you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy." The risk of getting a real slap was too great, so I didn't dare argue, obediently staring at the floor. But even from this angle, her face, distorted with rage, seemed like the face of a completely alien, terrifying person. Hey. What the hell am I even doing? Do I have enough health left to appreciate her aesthetics at a moment like this? Jingyao, it hurts, stop, I pleaded, knowing that heroic impulses were inappropriate now. A smart person wouldn't risk it in the face of inevitable reprisal. Seeing that I finally understood, Jingyao snorted contemptuously. And finally she unclenched her hand, leaving behind only a mess and a trail of unspoken threat behind the slammed door.